whenever you're ready.
Oh, I'm ready. Alrighty, guys, we are fortunate now to welcome Adam Stjärnljus, creative director and co-founder of Wishfully, creative director of Planet of Lana. Adam, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm so happy to be here and talking to you.
I am grateful that you were willing to join. As I told you prior to recording, one of the most requested interviews I've gotten in a long time. So that's pretty darn cool, and no pressure, right?
That's amazing to hear, and so excited.
I'm excited to talk to you about it. Now, before we talk about Planet of Lana proper, you're the co-founder of Wishfully, and the studio was founded in 2018. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes.
Tell me a bit about that studio.
So our studio, we're quite a small indie game studio in Sweden. Gothenburg is where we're based. And yeah, I mean, this is our debut game, and it all started back in 2018 when me and my ex-wife actually started the studio from the beginning, and then it kind of spiraled, and more founders came on to the team, and then we started Wishfully Studios actually early 2019, and then it's been a long journey. I can tell you that, because we started so both most of us that found, or all of us that founded the studio, had never worked in the game industry before. We were like me myself, I knew a lot about games as a consumer, but I didn't know anything about the industry or how to actually make games. So you can imagine it's been a long journey getting to this point of releasing our first game and getting awesome reviews and feedback from players and everyone. So yeah, it's been a long journey, and here we are.
So that begs the question: if you didn't have prior experience in the gaming industry, how did you learn all the necessary skills to create a video game, much less one that's so well revered?
Um, yeah, I think I mean, just jumping out there basically. So I was lucky enough I ran a small film production company or animation production company, and so I was able to work on the side on that, and then I could put a lot of time into Planet of Lana for over 2 years, and we were a lot of founders who were working on the side, and so it basically enabled us to have almost a 3-year pre-production period, like when we did our like vertical slice of the game. And as we did that, we pitched the game to a lot of publishers and the likes on different game conferences, and we got feedback, and we iterated, and we learned from our mistakes. And I think that was really what enabled us to do a really good game, was that because if we would have gotten like a publishing deal early, the game probably wouldn't have gotten as good, because it was that kind of long process of struggling with finding out like how the puzzle design should work, like how the graphical style, this 2.5D style we have with this mix of 3D and 2D and all that. It took so long to kind of like settle down into what the game is now. And I think, I mean, the long production is and pre-production before we actually started. So the actual production started in 2020, so it was almost 3 years of actual like production. But that long period before, where we could try things, where we could fail and redo stuff, really was key. And then, I mean, we just have such a talented team also, and then for later on in the project, we got programmers that have been doing games before, so like the technical side of things were kind of covered, but from a game design perspective and running a game studio and all that, we have never done that before.
For you to have pitched it to multiple publishers and the way you worded it, that implies rejection on that front. And you said the word failures. Is that what took place, and is that what forced you into refinement?
Yeah, definitely. So the project started with me like painting this key art that we still have as our main key art in all the promotions, and which is still the box art. So I painted that in Photoshop and got kind of the core idea. And then so my idea was that I decided I was going to finish this project, but I was thinking much more smaller scale, maybe me and a programmer. And then my ex-wife joined. She had project management background and marketing background, and then it kind of just spiraled. But in the beginning, it was like a 2D game, much more like retro, like Prince of Persia or like Another World, those old games where they have this like grid system and frame by frame animations. And it's this like animation system that makes it look nice in a retro way, but it's also makes it sluggish. And we didn't have this 2.5D depth of the game for the first iteration. So after half a year after we started in the autumn of 2018, and we were a half year later, we pitched the game for the first time at a proper game conference, and then we had this little, very tiny demo of the game, and that was much more flat. It wasn't that depth, and it was all 2D frame by frame animations. And we noticed that all like the players at the conference, they were like so excited seeing our like art, like the key art and everything like that, and the whole like verbal pitch of it. But to publishers, we showed this demo and we explained the whole scope and everything, and we got quite tough feedback that like that wouldn't cut it. Like, we've sold this really epic, immersive cinematic experience, and that it didn't like marry with this like technology that we had at that time. So then we went back to the drawing board and thought about it, and then redid it doing it more with having the characters in 3D, so we could have a dynamic animation system, so we could get much more tighter controls and like that balance of um, direct feedback when you're controlling the character and still having nice animations is of course much more doable when you're doing it in 3D with a 3D animation system in the engine. So that was a big thing, and also that we took it to 2.5D where we could have this depth in the world while still keeping this hand painted look as we have in the game, which I think we've succeeded with very well. But that was also a long journey going from all 2D to 2.5D in the final look that we have now. And I think that took almost over 3 years, I would say, until we had this look that we have now, because it was also when our very talented lead level designer Rickard Karlsson came into the team also, and also the second game artist on the project, Jimmy Chan, that really, and everyone in the team really contributed with so much, both in the technical aspect and in the art department, to kind of create this final look and responsivity in the controls and everything to be able to tell this like immersive cinematic story. So yeah, it was a long rant. I hope that answered your question.
That did, and then some, and I appreciate it. You began with that art that you painted in, you said Photoshop?
Yeah,
Is that right?
exactly.
What kind of art style would you say it is? Like, not watercolor, not hand painted, but kind of elements of both. How would you describe that art style?
I would say that we call it hand painted, but it's not hand painted in the sense that we draw it on paper, scan it in, and do it that kind of way. But it's that hand painted feel, right? And I would say that it's a mix between like oil, gouache, and watercolors, and somewhere in between that. So it's really, for me, it's never been like the process of it has never been as important as the actual output of how it looks, like how the final game looks. And we've used so many mixed techniques of, we both have 3D objects in there where we like pre-baked lighting and then painted on top of that, and then we have a lot of like assets that are painted from the ground up in Photoshop, and it's all a mix of so many things that create that final look.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. At the core of our story as players play through, I think at the core of it is a relationship between Lana and her sister. But that's not to say you're playing with her sister. In fact, you have a companion throughout the game, yes?
That's correct.
Tell
Mui.
me. Yes, Mui. Tell me a bit about uh, the story that you wanted to tell and why Lana and Mui needed to be together to tell it.
It was really, I mean, the story has evolved a lot over the years, and I've co-directed the game with Claes Eriksson, who's also the script writer. So he took that kind of core story idea and evolved it to an actual script, like much more fleshed out. And it's evolved a lot over the years, but in the core idea, it's always been this story of this young girl, Lana, and her cute creature companion, and them going out on this epic adventure together on this planet. And it was really important, part of the core idea, that it wasn't going to be a cooperative game, right? So that's also a question that we got a lot from publisher. Can't you make it cooperative so we can play it together with a friend or like with your kid or whatever? But I really wanted, like, the core idea is to kind of get that, try to create that bond that you get with a dog in real life. So you have this like companion that you can give commands to, but it's not, you can't control, you can't jump around and do whatever you want with it. You still have to relate to, to that, yeah, that relationship that you have. And I thought that was really an interesting thing that I wanted to explore, and that, yeah, that's like the core of the whole thing. So it's of course this grander, like, epic story in Planet of Lana, but also at its core, it's also that relationship that's a huge part of the game between Lana and this creature companion. And I find it so interesting that it's become so much better than I would have thought actually, because you can really tell, well, like when we've seen players play the game, that you really connect to Mui, and like you care about her very early, just through, your collaboration with her. And like, and people have told me that they don't feel alone while they play the game. They feel that they have this creature with them as they play. So I think that's a really fun feedback to get, that we succeeded with that.
It seems quite appropriate too, because in our journey, very early on in our story, Lana loses access to the people of her village, and there's a sense of loneliness and determination to get her people back from invaders. And in discovering Mui, suddenly, I don't know if this is putting words in your mouth or in the mouths of players, but it feels like with that companion, you're not alone. And because you're not alone, you can do it. Is that something that you guys strove for as you
Yeah,
realize?
definitely. It's very deliberate. Yeah. Yeah, and it's kind of, I mean, she in the beginning, it's not that big spoilers because it's what happens first in the game. But as you say, these robot armies invading your planet, and Lana is forced out of her village with all the people getting taken away, and she's all alone in the wilderness. And then finding this little creature Mui, she kind of finds her new hope, and together they together they are strong. And I mean, that's also the core of the whole, for people that haven't played the game, that's the core of the whole kind of gameplay, um, in the game, that like what Lana can do and what Mui can do separately and together is really the core of the whole experience. So Mui can jump higher than you or fit into tight spaces, um, and then, yeah, together you have to collaborate to sneak past the robots and other dangerous things, and work together to solve the puzzles of the world.
Really fun balance, I think, between Lana and Mui in terms of what they can and can't do. To your point, Mui can jump higher, get into smaller spaces, but Mui can't break boards or turn certain levers and such. So I think the balance is useful. Now, I fell in love with very early on the mechanics of the game. Now, in some ways, I think listeners who haven't seen footage, we're describing a 2D platformer, but something you guys do at Wishfully very successfully, I think, is teach the player how to use the mechanics of the game ahead of solving a puzzle with those mechanics. I'm sure, and I think you alluded to this earlier on, that puzzle solving and the teaching of the player was deliberate based on feedback.
I mean, we had a very since what I was touching on before, that we had such a long like pre-production, and we made the whole game, like all the puzzles, in a puzzle prototype as well, but only the puzzle part. So not like, and that was very like, very ugly graphics and everything, like very prototypey. But it really helped us test all the puzzles a lot before they were actually made by the programmers. It was one of our game designers that could do that to visual scripting and such, and we could like create all the puzzles and test it a lot. And that was really the core like that was how we were able to really pinpoint on how we should introduce all the mechanics in a different way. And we also decided very early on to make the game slightly more approachable than like Limbo or Inside, to have it more like but still trying to strike that balance of having it like so people easily can get into it and not get frustrated, but still having the puzzles that are interesting and still pose a challenge that you can feel smart and that they are interesting. So, and that's such a hard balance to strike. And I think I'm very happy with how it all ended up in Planet of Lana, and I would say that it's a lot of testing and iteration that's made it possible.
So when you're testing those puzzles, does that mean you're like finding a friend, be like, hey, go solve this for us, and like watching how they solve it before you decide what the right balance is?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question, because you can test things in a lot of ways, and that was also something that we needed to figure out how to do in the best way. And we so we didn't depending on what we wanted to kind of answer, we tested it in different ways. But at its core, yes, like letting friends or friends of friends and such try the game, and then recording the screen, and then letting them talk freely, like how is your like thought process in this puzzle, like okay, I see this thing, maybe I should use that with that, and then that can happen. And then you realize, okay, what we thought was super obvious is not obvious at all. There's a lot of things like that. It's so hard making good puzzles, and I have to give a lot of credit to Don Faxe, our lead puzzle designer. And the puzzles really changed for like became so much better when he took that role. And he actually started as technical animator, and then like halfway through the project we realized that he was a genius when it came to that kind of creating logical puzzles. It's really a skill, and very, very, very hard, I think.
Was there ever a point where the game was too hard or too easy?
Yeah, definitely. We've definitely had to. We've done so much puzzles that we scrapped and tested and changed, and up until quite late in the project, because it's also that it's so hard with those kind of puzzles, because if you have like a shooter, or like a platformer where you have to be quick or precise, it's a different type of challenge, right? But logical puzzles, people have such a wide range of ability to solve it, and differently, and and how fast they solve it. So finding that balance is really hard, because we could have a puzzle that was super easy for one person and impossible for another, because it's just that finding that balance there, and that's yeah, it's a very interesting thing.
I can imagine. Yeah, no, I can imagine. We've neglected to talk about so far cinematic and sound design. And sound design is what I want to touch on first, if you don't mind. Um, from the very opening moments, I feel like the score and the music is super important. Uh, but then also moments of silence where sound really plays a big part, from enemies to traversal to the echo of little things. It's like, maybe I misheard this, and you tell me, Adam, but like there were moments where I feel as the camera panned or zoomed out, sounds would be further away or closer to. Talk to me a bit about sound design.
I mean, it's such a big part of the game, both music and sound. And I'm so happy that we had both Takeshi Furukawa as the composer and Setete, who made the sound design. It's an Italian studio in Turin. Um, with I mean, they've been just so amazing, and they actually have this whole system that I don't think, like, maybe you play the whole game and you never figure out, but as you touched on that, you noticed, like, if you just stay still, like in somewhere out in the nature in the game, the soundscape will start to change. Just as you are out in a forest, like if you're walking, you can't hear all the sounds, but if you're staying still, you can start hearing like
Yeah.
flies, and you can hear more like the birds in the background. And so they've actually implemented that system. They've paid so much detail and attention to a lot of stuff like that, or like that you can like hear things before you see them, just in the right spot. And yeah, there's a lot of details like that I think really makes an experience like this, because like all parts of it needs to be really at the highest level, I think, to really um, sell the adventure and the immersion of you being there.
And music, is that, would you say that's a similar concept?
Yeah, definitely. So music wise, I mean, it's quite a funny story, because I talked to you when we were at that conference, and we got a lot of like criticism from publishers, that first one. At that conference, I pitched the game, like the elevator pitch was kind of Inside plus The Last Guardian in a Studio Ghibli universe. And then there was this journalist from the Daily Mirror there, and he really loved the game, how it looked and everything like that. So he wrote an article in the Daily Mirror and put our like key art and everything like that in there.
Mm-hmm.
And then Takeshi Furukawa, who's the composer of The Last Guardian, saw that article, like scrolling just his feed
Mm-hmm.
on the internet, and and it just stuck with him. And he said to me afterwards, he never contacted anyone like that before or after, but it was just something that day, and he saw that and he thought like, this project looks really interesting. So he sent me an email, and
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was a hoax, because I mean, we just started,
Mm-hmm.
we were struggling, and then and also since I pitched the game uh, with that like elevator pitch with The Last Guardian, and then that the composer of The Last Guardian contacts me and says like, hey, do you have any composers for your game? I would be interested in like talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it was a long process. It took like 2 years before we actually signed, but it's been a magical process having him on board, and he's just such a professional, and he have such high like creative standards. And he recorded the whole soundtrack in Budapest. I was fortunate enough to be there as well, with 100 people, full a full orchestra, like
Wow.
in the orchestra hall there. And yeah, it was just amazing to to have music of that quality in the game, and it really makes all the difference, I think, and really elevates the game um, to such a higher level, to have it recorded also with real instruments. So I'm really happy for that.
What a surreal moment, too.
Yes.
Man, that's a cool memory to get to have in kind of in the back of your mind, yeah?
Yeah, and walking around there, because I also had film photographer with me, so we're actually gonna do like a behind the scenes short, like mini documentary of that we'll release later.
Mm-hmm.
But walking around in that like hall and just seeing these note sheets, and seeing like Planet of Lana and seeing like the titles of it was very special.
That's cool. That's cool. We had a lot of people write in questions, Adam. A lot
Yeah.
of people, a lot of questions for you. This one comes from Nerd Propellant. They would like to know, what was the decision behind going with a fictional language for Lana versus dialogue that people would be able to understand easily?
So the process behind that was because we started without any words at all, actually. So the original idea was to create the story and like having people understand it without anything. But as we progressed through the development, we realized that since Lana gives commands to Mui, so it started like she had a whistle, and then okay, but how like just different whistles and click sounds, or how should she talk to Mui, like, and then it kind of grew from that.
Mm-hmm.
That okay, she should be able to talk to Mui, and then it expanded, and Klaus, the scriptwriter and co-director, created this language with its proper grammar and everything. So if you're like attentive, you can like learn it, even though it's simple, but still like has its structure and grammar and so on. So and we really thought that also added another layer. Even though you can't understand exactly what they're saying, you still can convey more emotions in the storytelling, in the dialogue, with tonality of voice and all that kind of things. So we think it worked out really well.
I think so too. I was able to project kind of my thoughts and emotions onto Lana because I didn't know what she was saying, but I totally knew what she was saying. Um, I'm also, and maybe this is just coincidence or overthinking, but there was a phonetic inflection that I picked up on with how different words were said. So rather than Lana, it was always Lana, and I don't know if that's a language thing or whatnot, but I noticed it and it stood out to me.
Yeah, that's interesting that you say. It's also another interesting thing is that all the voice actors is Italian also, since our also because we did the casting with Swedish people mostly, and then Italian because our sound design studio is there, and
Mm-hmm.
Francesco was sorting the recording and everything. Um, but I also think that because it's an imaginative language, we thought it was good also to have all the actors from the same country,
Mm-hmm.
because it kind of gives that credibility also that they have kind of the same um, yeah tone when they speak this, and the voice actors were so good, and especially uh, Bianca Zoe Mantelli, who
Mm-hmm.
who plays Lana. She was only 12 when she recorded.
Really?
Yeah, and it was her first job because he did the Francesco did the casting at like acting class
Uh-huh.
school, and this was her first like professional job. And after that, after this job, the sound studio that you recorded the voiceover, they hired her then after this for like Netflix things
Mm-hmm.
and those kind of things. So it was really fun also to be able to propel her career a little bit, and she did such an amazing job on Lana.
Yeah, quite a feather in your cap. Go from acting class to acclaimed, award-winning game. Here you
Yes.
go. Just enjoy that. Let's see here. My friend Ellery, they wrote in with a couple questions as well. They say there were so many different biomes. Thinking about like coloring black and white space. Did you go into development knowing that you wanted all of these different biomes, or did the game kind of naturally evolve to have them?
No, we actually did quite a. We had it like all figured out, like scene by scene, like this spreadsheet of scenes. Like okay, puzzle, like easy puzzle, hard puzzle, like transport section, like this narrative scene here. So we had this like big timeline basically of the whole game with biomes and everything. But then, of course, that evolved and changed a lot during the production, and we kind of moved the whole section to another place because it made much more sense
Mm-hmm.
after a while and stuff like that. But regarding the biomes and the different, like, because one of the key things that we've tried to keep to during development is making a fun game. We didn't want to make a side-scrolling puzzle adventure that was more of a walking simulator or so. We still want to like keep the variation both with like fun puzzles or new mechanics or new environments, because that's what I think is fun also in games, like when you can discover new places and like not reuse too much stuff. But we actually had more biomes planned, so we scrapped actually some.
Well,
But
one of their questions also is there DLC coming? Do we see those biomes again or in a sequel?
there's not going to be any DLCs. I can tell you that. But we have, yeah, I don't want to say too much, but we have bigger plans for the IP.
That's cool. Very nice. So, Planet of Mui on the way, I'm sure, right? You touched on kind of the 2D platform not wanting to be a walking simulator. I find that interesting because in our game, in your game, in the game that I play, there's no combat. There are moments where you can dispatch enemies, by way of environment, but no direct combat. Can you talk a little bit about that? That's a choice.
Yeah, it's definitely a choice, and it's that I think it's really good for creativity when you put some limitations
Hmm.
in that process. And you play as this 11-year-old girl, and it was a very early decision that uh, she wasn't going to have any weapons of any kind, and that you had to use like your agility and wit and the collaboration with your little creature companion to make it through the world.
Hmm.
But then as you play the game, you get these kind of upgrades. So both Mui and Lana gets an upgrade that they can use to. So Mui has this like hypnotic ability, so she can control some of the creatures of the planet,
Hmm.
which in turn lets you interact with them and the world in different fun ways. And Lana also has this upgrade that she gets, so that I won't spoil exactly what that is, but that you also can get to control other stuff. Um, but yeah, sorry, I don't remember the original question.
Or just the idea of like no direct combat. I'm not walking through
Oh
with a
yeah,
sword, not hopping on
yeah.
things, that kind of stuff.
No, but I mean, yeah, it's the core idea of this thing that you go through the world with this young kid and her creature companion, and having to figure out how. And I think that there's something very interesting in that you feel like this feeling of being this underdog, but still together you can make it.
A number of people asked if there would be Mui merch, and I see that wonderful little plush over your right shoulder. Is that something you guys are? Yeah, there you go.
This is actually one of the only one that has the little weird tail, but yeah, this is how it looks. So this is a prototype, and there definitely will be movie merch coming, but we just haven't gotten around. We needed to focus on the game first.
Oh,
we're a
yeah.
small studio, and we had to get priorities straight. And but yeah, it's definitely coming.
Very cool. All right, so that's fun. Jam Pack Sam wrote in and wants to know what's the spoiler-free impact that you're hoping players uh, that players like get from the game. So the impact on players
Hmm.
from your game.
I mean. So when I started dreaming about making games, I really wanted to, because I've had so many great experience myself with games, and I
Mm-hmm.
think the best experiences I had was with games that stayed with me, either through like the story or just the world they presented, or or whatever it was, like inspiring or had an emotional impact. And I wanted to create a game that could stay with you after you were finished, even though Planet of Lana is a short game, and I really hope it can have a lasting impact on people. Yeah, that's basically it. But I can, it's really an experience if you haven't played our game. I think, and we got so much positive feedback. We get emails all the time from. I mean, that's the best thing I think with releasing the game. Like we're so happy with the reviews and everything, but it's so fun also getting these like emails where people just from these like super fans who really love the game. Because I mean, games, you, like people like different types of games. This definitely not everyone is gonna love Planet of Lana, but like for me, this, if I wouldn't make games, this would be my dream game to play. I would have been one of those people writing an email like, "Thank you so much for making this game." So, and I think the whole team has really, it's really a labor of love, and I think you can feel that when you play the game. So, I don't know if that answers the question. It was kind of a rant, but
No, it certainly does. And one of the questions I often ask developers, it's not a fair question, is, like, are you happy with it? And I think you really
I
answered that.
am. Yeah, I am really happy, and I really believe also that, I mean, it can always be like I can see things that could be better for sure. It's not a perfect game, but I think it's really hard to make. I think even if everyone would like uh, love your game, you would still see things that you would want to do better. So, and I think, but I'm really happy with the game. I couldn't be more happier. I think it's actually uh, been much more. It's I can't talk today, but it's I'm so happy with it. It's exceeded my expectations from when I started working on it, and the reason for that is all the people in the team that has contributed to it. And like, yeah, the team we've created here at Wishfully, that just, yeah, putting in all their creativity into the game made it spiral out of control into the great thing that it is today. And I'm so excited also to that this is just the beginning for our studio. That this is kind of like the springboard to the next game.
It's been neat. The next game. Oh, are you alluding?
Uh, no, I mean, we are going to make more games
Yeah.
in the studio. That's what I'm saying.
I wasn't trying to catch you in anything. It was just like, oh, wait. It has to feel cool to be so proud of a project and see it so well received, both from critics and gamers alike. I mean, Xbox and PC gamers have really flocked to this one in a year where we are being gifted some incredible indie, double, and triple A titles. Planet of Lana seems to stand on its own, getting praise. I mean, even head of Xbox Phil Spencer was tweeting about your game and playing that. That has to feel good.
It does feel surreal also. It feels really good, and I'm so happy that Phil liked it as well. Yeah, it's been surreal. It really has been, and just trying to take small moments of appreciation and like really feeling grateful for all, um, for that people like the game and that they play it, and yeah, so happy about that. That's, I mean, the thing you want making a game is that people get to experience what you've spent so many years and hard work on creating. So it's so fun.
I feel like a lot of people got to experience the game as well because you brought it to Xbox Game Pass, and
Yes.
the game is exclusive to Xbox and PC. Exclusive to Xbox in terms of the console space. It's on Game Pass, which means you have kind of an embedded audience there. But how does that conversation come up and how does the choice come up to be exclusive to any platform and then to go into Game Pass, the benefits of that and the drawbacks?
I mean, for us, it's definitely only been very positive. Xbox has been so great to work with, and they've been so supportive, and they really love indie games over there. And Yeah, I mean, for us it was an easy decision. I mean, it's so hard making a game in the first
Hmm.
place, making your first game, and it's even harder getting it out there for people
Hmm.
to know that it even exists. You can make the best game in the world, but then no one plays it and no one knows that it exists. So having that like extra boost of, having the game on Game Pass, lowering the bar of entry for players that maybe don't play this genre otherwise and might
Hmm.
be drawn in by the like key art or whatever, and then they just start and play it and try it. And that helps us a lot also, because um, it's just that kind of organic marketing also that we get from them, and proper marketing that we get from Xbox.
Hmm.
So it's really been an easy decision for us, and I think been so positive.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, Adam, I've kept you for a long time this morning, and I appreciate you taking that time. Is there anything that you want to pass on to listeners that haven't tried the game, or things that you would like players to go back and find if they haven't seen it?
Yeah, I can just like finish like for people that hasn't played the game, or people who has played the game, which I think is an interesting thing about our game, is that you can play it in such different ways that we see players play it. They see it as a mission. They just go through it. They want to finish it quickly. They solve the puzzles and then go forward. But it's really one of those games that you can, if you take the time to look at the details, like the more attentive you are to the background and all those. We have a lot of details explaining the backstory and the bigger lore of the whole universe, and so there's a lot of that to find there in the game if you're interested in that kind of thing. But it's totally fine to play it however you want it, but
Mhm.
however you want. But just letting people know that there's a lot of details to discover as well.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, Planet of Lana, developed, of course, by Wishfully. Adam, thank you so much for joining us, listeners. You can find Planet of Lana on Xbox platforms for $19.99. It's also on Game Pass. It's also on PC. Check it out wherever you are. Thank you guys for listening, and you can find more XEP on all your podcast services and support us over on Patreon at patreon.com/Xbox Expansion Pass. Adam, thank you once again for joining me. I am grateful for your time.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure. Anytime.